It's not just an hour lesson of, I'm going to teach you how to shoot a gun. This is a lifestyle that you have to agree to immerse yourself in. The classes that were being marketed to women were very cartoonish. The training that you were getting wasn't real, it wasn't accurate, it wasn't truthful, in my opinion. I wanted to bring women real, accurate, scenario-based. I'm not like, Tomb Raider. People were warning other people about me at that competition. They're like, don't think that she can't shoot.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Blueprint. I'm Brandon Adams and I'm here today with Jerah Hutchins. She is the founder and owner of Clearing the Chamber. Today she's going to shoot us straight. We'll see how it goes. Jerah.
Hey friend, it's been a long time.
It has been a long time. It's so funny, like I met you forever ago and I had no idea what you'd gotten into. But, I'd seen you with social media over the last few years and what things have really kind of spun up to for you with handguns and everything. So tell me a little bit about what you're into. What's your business about?
Yeah, I think sometimes we feel like because we're connected on social media that we're actually staying in touch.
Right.
It almost feels like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, gosh, you and I haven't talked in,
10?
Gosh, it's been a while,
Yeah.
10 or 15 years for sure. And I've followed your art, and that's been really impressive. So super proud of you on that.
Thank you.
I went to, I just kind of accidentally got into this gun game.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really know what the catalyst, I don't remember the day that I said, this is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
It was just kind of something that slowly happened.
Yeah.
And I was a competition 3-gunner in my youth.
What does that mean?
So 3-gun is like competitions where you shoot every platform.
Okay.
So you're shooting matches against other people and you have to utilize pistol, shotgun, and rifle.
Okay.
In those competitions. Yeah. So it had nothing to do with self-defense. It was purely, my grandpa taught me how to shoot when I was 11. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed it. It was therapeutic for me. Yeah. I know that's going to sound a little odd to people, but it is. I think that learning how to responsibly and proficiently handle a weapon is an incredible skill to have for anyone. And I think it breeds things like accountability and responsibility and a love of freedom. I just think it's and I became very passionate about the skill very early on in my life. Mm-hmm. And then when I was in my 20s, really I was 19 and I moved out to the city. I moved to McKinney actually. Mm-hmm. And I moved in with my best friend in high school. You may know her, Toni Brookins. Mm-hmm. I lived with her for a little while and it was really interesting because we had neighbors, specifically there was a guy that lived next door to us that was going to school to be a pastor. It was theology.
Okay.
And we were moving in and I had this big gun case that had my shotgun and stuff in it, and some of our neighbors would come over and see it and they would be like, why do you feel like you need this? And I'm like, why do you feel like you don't?
Yeah.
It was always it was part of our culture as country kids.
Yeah.
To know how to do this. And it was just always something that was kind of ingrained in us. And then I would go to the gun range in my 20s by myself. By that time, by the time I was 21, I had 10 years of experience, under my belt with a gun. Right. And so I would just go by myself. And back then, that was over 20 years ago. You didn't really see a lot of women that were going to the gun range alone. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a weird deal. And people are fixated and attracted to weird things. And so I would get people that would come up to me at the gun range and go, hey, can you, how did you learn how to do this? And, you feel comfortable coming here by yourself? And, I'm like, yeah. And can you teach my wife how to do this? Yeah. Can you teach, or I'd have women that were there with their husbands that go, can you teach me? He's being mean to me.
Right.
And it was always, and that was something that flabbergasted me too for a long time is I was like, what is this like friction between husbands and wives and learning how to, handle a pistol? Like, what is that about? Mm-hmm. And I figured it out. It took me a long time to figure it out. But, husbands are, imagine how you would feel if you were teaching your wife. You guys have been together forever. Yeah. And sometimes I think, or not even sometimes, a lot of times people are husbands dads, brothers are too emotionally invested in the outcome to be patient, and they've been doing it too long. And it's just an impatient thing for a husband to teach their wife how to shoot. And so I just started doing gun lessons for women. I didn't have a male client till I was in my 30s.
Did you have to get a license for that at all? Like, how did to instruct somebody? What did you have to go through to do that?
No, there's not a school necessarily that you go to for it. That's like accredited, like a college.
Okay.
So I actually wrote my own academy on how to teach someone how to shoot. So it was kind of
over time.
Yeah. So I really started doing this about 17 years ago is when Clearing the Chamber formed. But I didn't really go full time with it until 2017. It took me a while to build up a book of business. And part of the reason for that is, and I really hate telling this part of the story because it makes me sound like I'm a whiner, but the truth of the matter is that a lot of people didn't want to trust a woman to teach them how to shoot, especially if you were a man. It was really weird. It was a weird thing for men to go, "Hey, woman, can you teach me how to shoot?" It's almost like it's like a flip-flopped. It's like you flip something on its axis. And now it's become more and more common. And now, 30% of my clientele is men. And I'm actually learning how to teach SWAT right now. And so I really dove into it. I was really good at teaching intro to handgun. And then I sought out instructors and operators and Navy SEALs and people, Green Berets, like people who are really good at this. And I'm like, I want you to teach me how to do, what you do. And so it was a lot of rolling around in the dirt and the mud and skinned knees and unorthodox shooting positions and anticipation of threat, and having to analyze vulnerable points. I had to learn all of this over the span of, a 10 or 12 year period to be able to teach more advanced training, because that was the thing that a lot of women were missing is, they'll take intro to handgun or license to carry in the state of Texas, but then their gun sits and collects dust on the end table or in a safe in their drawer or in a safe in their house. They're not carrying it with them when they need to. What does that look like for a woman?
Yeah.
And the more that I dove into it and the more that I dove into the culture of it, and the more that I really studied this, I came to understand that women are actually statistically more responsible for the physical protection of children than men are. And I know that kind of goes against what we think that men are for, right? Like you're protectors and providers, correct or incorrect?
Oh, correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's great on paper.
Yeah.
And it's what you're supposed to do. And I'm not trying to take that away from men. There was a coach, gosh, I forget who it was, but he had the greatest quote ever. He said, that our team was perfect on paper, but the game was played on grass.
Sure.
Okay. This is the same thing here, right? On paper, it looks like you should be completely safe if the man in your life, your husband, the father of your children, is proficient with weapons, has discernment, is kind, makes good decisions with money, he's a great leader. Like our family should be totally safe if that person, that man in our life exists.
Right.
But that's not true, because that man in your life has to go out to a job. He has to do things outside of the family to provide and protect the family. Okay. And statistically, females, moms, women spend more time with the children than anybody. And therefore, they are more responsible for the physical protection of children. Yet, the majority of them have no idea how to go about this.
Right.
They have no idea how to do it. And so then what happens is you get women, moms, who will make mistakes in the eyes of their husband, right? So I had to mediate. This couple was on the brink of divorce over this situation because the mother stopped to help a man that was stranded on the side of the road with her two toddlers in the car.
Yeah.
And her husband's like, why would you ever do that?
Right.
And she's like, why are you punishing me for having a kind heart? And he doesn't understand how to explain to her, that's not why I'm mad at you.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of friction there. And so he was like, I really want you to teach my wife how to use a gun. And I'm like, I don't think you understand what this entails.
Yeah.
It's not just an hour lesson of, I'm going to teach you how to shoot a gun. This is a lifestyle that you have to agree to immerse yourself in in order to be able to become a master of this skill.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a thing that a lot of women are not willing to do, even though they are moms.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I teach intro to handgun, which is the time when I usually get my hands on women for the first time, right? And I say, do you really, as it stands right now, feel like you could physically protect your child against a threat, a predator, a carjacker, a mugger, a active shooter? Like, do you feel like you could do that? And they all say yes, because they all have this mama bear mentality,
Sure.
right? Don't mess with mama bear.
Yeah.
Okay. But you have nothing to back it up at this point. So it's a lie.
Yeah.
It's a farce.
Yeah.
By the end of the intro to handgun class, they understand how easy and difficult it is to shoot a gun. The fundamentals are easy. Grip, stance, sight picture, trigger pull, easy things.
Yeah.
Recoil management and marksmanship, totally different animal.
Right.
It's not just point and shoot.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
And so they have to understand, once they get through that intro to handgun class, they're like, I don't have the ability to physically protect my children, and I need to figure this out.
Yeah.
And so it's a game of, you don't know what you don't know, and you have to listen to me tell you what you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to implement it into your life.
Yep. So I'm gonna dig into a couple points you made there. You're talking about the husband that got mad at the wife for stopping with their two small kids in the car and pulling over. Did she have a handgun at the time?
No.
Okay.
Completely unarmed.
Do you see the reason that the husband would have been mad at that time?
I did.
Okay. And the woman did not see the reason that the man would have been mad at that time. She couldn't understand.
She could not understand.
And so what you're saying is, by a woman going out and being licensed, taught how to carry a gun, how to operate a gun, that kind of levels the playing field from the physical differences that are out there. Because when I see that, if my wife had gone out and done that, I would have been distraught. Because quite frankly, men just are bigger physically. They're stronger physically. And I'm not saying that we all are not equal when it comes to physical strength, when it comes to that. And I don't ever want to get my wife put in a bad situation. She's the most, you've seen the way we are together. She's the most amazing thing in my life. I want to protect that. I want to make sure that doesn't get taken over by some crazy that's out there, that she has a kind heart, pulls over to stop and help somebody, and they end up taking advantage of her. My two kids in the car who are 2 and 3 can't do anything about it. These people that are passing 1,000,000 miles an hour by them aren't going to do anything about it because he's pulled her in and done something else, right? Mm-hmm. She physically cannot protect herself. So what you're saying is this is leveling the playing field?
That's actually not what I'm saying, but
Okay.
I see why you would go there.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that a proper self-defense education
Mm-hmm.
would have prevented her from stopping at all.
Okay.
She would have known better, armed or not.
Perfect.
She would have known better than to do that, because there are zero, in my opinion, frankly, there are nearly, I won't say zero because there's an exception to every rule.
Okay.
But I will tell you that in my experience in doing this for 17 years, there are nearly zero reasons why a grown man stranded on the side of the road needs the help of any woman.
Okay. Can you elaborate by that?
Men should be proficient enough, in my opinion, to fix their own car. They should have a communication device that will allow them to call someone if they can't fix their own car, or they have 2 legs and they can walk their ass somewhere to get help.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason that a woman should need to stop, especially a woman with 2 young children in the car,
Mm-hmm.
should need to stop and take this man anywhere.
Right.
Another man can stop and help that man.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never seen, and this is what I teach. I launched a college safety seminar in 2023, and I travel around and I teach young women who are making the transition from high school to college.
Right.
And I teach them situational awareness, self-defense, non-lethal weapons, like things that they can carry with them on a college campus to protect them. And that's one of the things that I teach them is this. If a man rolls up to you in a parking garage or a grocery store parking lot and says, I need your help, my car's broken down, you walk away.
Yeah, 100%.
There's no reason that he should be asking you. He can walk in the grocery store and call somebody. He can walk in the grocery store and find another man who can help him. You don't need to help him. That is red flag, number one. And so a proper self-defense education will help. And we got to get our daughters, our boys should know this too. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But we got to get our daughters learning this when they're 11, 12, and 13 years old, like I did. When they are starting to become observant, when they can follow instructions, when they can notice things, when they can start trusting their gut. They need to start talking about, the parents need to start talking about this. But the problem that we have is that parents aren't teaching their kids this. And I'll tell you how I know. I'm a 42-year-old female that's been teaching guns for 17 years. This is the first time in my gun training career I have data on all my students. Over the last 2 years, I have had more 18 to 25-year-old men who have come to me for intro to handgun training than ever before that are not connected to me in any way. What I mean by that is they're not the kids of my clients. They're not any of that. They're literally people who just found me on the internet that said, I've never touched a gun before. I want to learn. And in my head, I'm thinking, why didn't your daddy teach you that? It's not that I don't want to teach him. And it's not that I turn him away. It's just that the men that are coming to me for training are usually coming to me for doorways and corners, for draw from holster, things like that. Not intro to handgun. I've never touched a gun before.
Right.
And it tells me that there's a significant absence of fathers in the home. There's a significant absence of fathers that have this, that know this skill, that are teaching their sons this skill. So we're not setting our sons up for success either. And then we're not setting our daughters up for success to show them you need to be able to create your own space, right? Like demand your own boundaries. That's what the college safety seminar does. And it's wild because I've had dads, Mark Lutz has probably been one of my favorite clients to ever put his daughter through that because he sat through the whole class. There's a lot of parents that drop their kids off and leave. I would love for them to sit and listen to this information so that so the younger siblings of these kids can be set up for success. And I actually run them through drills and I take these young girls and I show them the value of time. Because when I ask them, when I take a 16 or 17-year-old girl and I say, if you were in a situation of duress, if somebody was like breaking into your house and you were home alone and your parents were gone on a date and you called the police, how long do you think that it would take for the police to get there? And a lot of these girls, the number one answer I get is 2 minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
How accurate do you think that is?
Yeah, I don't think it's real. I mean, I'm guessing probably 11 to 15 minutes, something like that.
It's real. It's like 10 and a half minutes is normal. Yeah. Okay. But there, I dated a guy who had a teenage daughter, and there was a guy that tried to break into their house. She lived with her mother at the time, and they lived in Fort Worth. And there was a guy trying to break into their house, and her mom called the police, and the Fort Worth Police Department said, "We don't have anybody to send you."
Wow.
So that happens too, right? But the number one answer I get is 2 minutes. So I said, all right, get on the ground. And I get them on the ground and this was shocking the first time that I ever did this in class. But once it was over, the parents understood. And I held her down by her shoulders and I yelled in her face for 2 minutes. It was excruciating. Yeah. It was traumatizing to a degree. I mean, I don't want to overstate it, right? Yeah. And they were like, wow. And I'm like, now imagine if I just wasn't yelling in your face. What could I get done in 2 minutes? Yeah. Okay. So you don't have the time that you think you have. They're not going to get there when you think that they're going to get there as quickly as you think that they're going to get there. You have to have a plan. Yeah. Because you're your only first responder at that point. Right? And if you're a mom and you have a child or multiple children with you, you have to understand the cognitive load that is going to hit you in the face when you actually realize that this person is trying to kill me and my kids. What are you going to do? And there is that gender equalizer that you get with being armed, with having a firearm, right? But you have to understand how to use it. So I like to put people in, I think scenario-based training is the best thing that we have. I put women in, and frankly, I do it with teenagers too sometimes, is, how are you going to get your gun if you're seated in the vehicle and you can't get out? Right? A lot of people don't think about that, right? That's that's another unorthodox shooting position,
How easy can I
situation.
Get to it?
How easy can you get to it? A lot of people have a false sense of security because their gun is in their car.
Mm-hmm.
Well, where are you?
Yeah.
What good is it going to be in the car if you're in the mall?
Right.
What good is it going to be in the car if you're in the grocery store? So there's a saying in the self-defense community, if it's not on you, it's not on you.
Yeah.
So it has to become my goal, my passion, my mission in life is to get women to understand that your weapon, it doesn't have to be a gun. A gun isn't for everybody, right? Just because you have the right to do it, that's fine. But if you're an irresponsible person or somebody that likes to drink a lot or you have a drug habit, like you don't want to get yourself in that kind of situation, right? But it doesn't mean that you can't have no weapon, right? So whatever that weapon is, it has to be as important to you as this is. It has to be important to you as this is.
Right.
It has to be important to you as your car keys are.
Right.
Right. And that's the education that you need to be willing to get. And a lot of people don't have the time management skills to work that into their life. And so I teach time management too.
So are you saying that when people go to start bringing these things along, they have to be completely aware of the situation that they're walking into to make sure that they're protected when they're going into that? If you're getting in your car and you're going somewhere just because it's with you and your car's in the parking lot and you walk out of the parking lot and you get hit in the parking lot, you're too many feet away. You got to start thinking about, if you think it's 2 minutes, multiply that times 5, it's 10 minutes. If I could have done anything that I wanted in 2 minutes, imagine what I could do multiplied times 5. Imagine what I could do 30 feet, 30 yards, 300 yards away from the defense that I have. Your defense needs to be with you the entire time because of your surroundings is kind of where you're going with that.
Your gun, if that's what you choose, whatever weapon it is, should be with you more often than not. Do I carry my gun 24/7? No. Right. And I teach it for a living. But I would tell you that probably 90% of the time I'm armed.
Okay.
Wherever I am, unless it's an absolutely prohibited place and I would catch a felony for it. And even then I'm not comfortable with it because you just never know when and you never know where. But for women tend to be less, they tend to have less anxiety. They tend to say, well, that could never happen to me. Like that's their mindset that they have. Or I'm in a hurry, it won't happen to me, or, oh, I'll see it coming and I'll run away, and when you get them in the scenario-based training, and that's one of the things that Clearing the Chamber evolved into was I started writing my own curriculum. If I got the same question 5 times, I was writing a class on it or a workshop on it. So I have a myriad of classes now. So on my website, clearingthechamber.com, I have like the 4 core classes for Texas, which is Intro to Handgun, License to Carry, the What If Scenarios, and Draw from Holster, which is Intuitive Defensive Shooting. So those are the 4 main classes. And I set them up just like school, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior classes. And then I have a myriad of electives. So I have Prepare and What You Wear, which is a class for women that want to learn how to conceal carry in different outfits. What gear is available to you? What's your budget? I have things for everyone. And you don't need as much as you think you need to get this done, right? There's multiple there's holsters that can carry multiple guns, things like that,
Do you think there's stigmas with people that carry guns?
I think there are stigmas with people that carry guns from people who don't. And it's been proven time and time again for in the anti-gun community that if you would literally go and ride with a police officer, because they allow you to do that, citizens can go ride with cops. If you would do that for one night, there have been many anti-gunners that now understand why cops say the things that they do and why they ask, hey, I need to see your hands, or please just do as I say. That's how you stay the safest, because if you freak that cop out and he thinks that he or she, they want to go home to their families too, right? You're walking up to some random car with a stranger that you don't know. Anti-gunners don't have the capacity to think about this until they actually experience it. And that actually opens up your perspective, right? I think that a lot of people want to paint, Second Amendment, pro-Second Amendment people as, heathens, people who are looking for a reason. And I'm not saying that those people don't exist, but I'm saying that for the most part, listen, we live in a country of 350 million people. More than half of those people own firearms. Okay. There's over 1 trillion rounds of ammo in the United States alone. We're not the problem. We're not the problem. we're not going out and shooting people. Like it's not a problem. The problem is the mental health in this country, and we've touched on it time and time again. We know, if you've ever read, there's a myriad of books about it that have come out that are really, really good studies that they've done ever since. You and I are the last generation that knows what it's like not to have a cell phone and not to have internet. We're it.
Right, yeah.
No one's ever going to know what that is when we die. Yep. Like everybody's going to have, access to this. Yep. And people have, and that's one of the reasons why I teach time management, is people have this insane addiction to the internet and to their cell phone. They will not put it down. And I had this problem when I first launched the college safety course, and I made everybody put their cell phones in a basket because you're not going to when I'm teaching you something this important, you're not going to have your cell phone out surfing the net.
Right.
That's not going to be the deal. You're not going to be on Instagram. You're not going to be on Facebook. You need to be paying attention to what I'm telling you because I'm teaching you things that are going to save your life. Period. End of story.
Right.
And so we have this addiction, and it's made our mental health decline. We now have this terrible, filters on pictures and comparison to other women. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Right.
Everybody is so unique and wonderful in their own way. If they would just tap into that, you don't have to look like her, be like her, have that idea. Like you can do things, for yourself. And we have to teach our young kids that, and we have to keep them off of these things. And it's a huge issue in human trafficking as well, because this is how they get to your kids. And I've taken extensive amounts of human trafficking training, and that is the number one way that they get to your kids is through their gaming consoles. Yeah, they get to your kids through the gaming consoles, through the app, through TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. I took this really great training from a guy who was a police officer in Missouri who spearheaded human trafficking training in the law enforcement community, and he said that he was like, no child should have a smartphone until they're 17, until they're like 17 or 18 years old. Get them a dumb phone. Get them a flip phone where they can still text people and call people, but they don't have access to the internet on that phone. That's what's killing our kids. And that's where the mental health crisis is truly coming from. And there's a book called The Anxious Generation that touches on this too, with a lot of the scientifically backed studies that they've done over the last 20 years or so. And that's the biggest thing is, but parents don't want to do that because it's a built-in babysitter. Right. So maybe you need to start talking to some of our parents on how we were raised. Go outside and play.
Well, let me say this too. Like that's a little bit of an unfair comparison because it just wasn't available to us. Right. And I remember the first time I got a beeper and that thing went off and I was like, that was clout. Everybody's like, oh, he's got a beeper over there. It was kind of cool. Right. As technology evolves, as phones come out, as things change, it's accessible. And now if a kid does not have that, they're looked at as weird or they're looked at as a pariah. They're somebody on the outside. What's wrong with that family? Why can't she have that? Did she do something wrong? Those are things that we have to be, I think, we should probably coach them as to how much is enough or how do I safeguard my child in this phone from keeping that to happen. But now that the cat's already been out of the bag, how do you put that back? We can't turn back time.
Well, I appreciate the pushback on that because I think that people who truly believe in what they're saying don't mind being questioned. But my retort to that would be the parents are the ones that caused this, right? The parents are the ones that when your child comes to you and says, I want a $500 pair of sneakers and you go and buy it for them, you're starting that trend of, I'm going to put my money in a place that makes my child look like he or she is above everybody else. So now all these other parents have to keep up with these trends or their kids are bullies to them. The parents are the ones that are responsible for this. Parents are the problem, in my opinion. I think that a lot of the parents are the problem. And they say, well, if my kid, I'm just going to buy it for my kid because they want it. And if I don't, now I think that there's a difference if you earn it. I think there's a difference there. But when something is sitting in front of you that you weren't forward thinking enough to go, we always think advancements in technology are good, and they are, right? But you also have to think about the bad part. What's the worst case scenario on this? And the human trafficking component, the child trafficking component of this kind of technology is the worst case scenario. And parents have to be forward thinking on this. And they have to say, there has to be some access controls here.
Yeah.
And the punishment has to be, well, maybe not the punishment has to be severe, but there does have to be some really in-depth discussion with our children on the implications and the consequences of using this kind of technology. And I don't think that this generation of parents was effective in that. And now you're seeing the results of that. You're seeing the mental health problems, the active shooter issues, right? Because these kids feel inadequate. They feel inadequate because maybe their parents can't afford to get them the clothes and the shoes and the technology that other parents can. And parents aren't having these discussions with other parents. They're not sitting down and going with other parents at school board meetings or PTA meetings or whatever and going, what are we doing to our kids?
Yeah.
How can we curb this? What should be some rules that we should set in place? What are the conversations that we should have with our kids? Because then it turns into a dangerous situation for the children, but also for the parents. I mean, how many videos have you seen on social media where these predators just show up to these kids' houses because they give them their address on these gaming consoles and on Instagram, and they just show up and the parents are like, what the hell is going on here? It's because you got too comfortable giving your kids this technology, unfettered access to all of these things. And it's the number one way that these predators identify the kids. And they identify and they go after the kids whose parents who have problems in school, who have mental health issues because they're being made fun of. That's the kids that they're going after, poverty-stricken kids too.
But you also have to, as a parent, I'm going to give you this perspective. I've raised 2 kids. I have a 19 and a 16-year-old right now. Going through the perspective of seeing what it's taken to watch them grow and learn and do all these different things. Like, I can't safeguard them from everything. I cannot do that. You
sure can't.
It is impossible. It is me, as my role as a father, to sit down and have conversations and help them learn and help them teach, and teach them the things that I want them to watch out for. I can't. If they want to get in this thing, they're going to get in this thing. Remember our generation. We would go outside and our parents had no idea where we were from sun up to sundown. And we were miles and miles and miles away from our house, and we came back. Was there less danger back then? No, but it wasn't captured. Everyone didn't have a phone running around in their hand. Everyone didn't have something back in their face recording them saying what they were doing. These are the things that I get concerned about. Like, I absolutely agree with you. Like, we need to teach people to be careful on things, but we can't snuff things out. We got to be realistic about the culture that we live in. And we also can't turn our kids into someone who's going to be bullied because they don't have accessibility to certain things, nor is it my responsibility to make sure that I'm giving my kids less because someone down the street can't afford to give their kids that.
No. That's not what I meant. And I'm sorry if I was unclear, because that's a very valid point. What I mean is that sometimes parents will give their kids this abundance because they can afford to, and it's fine. Like, is that not why you work and be successful so 100%. That your family can have, right? But they're not always coupling it with the conversations about, listen, how you treat people is important. And because you have things, you can't shun the kid that doesn't. Right. And then enforcing that rule, because a lot of parents will be I've seen this a lot, especially in, because I work a lot in domestic violence as well. But I've seen this a lot in family components where someone will accuse this child of being a bully, and they very well are. And there's evidence to substantiate it now because we have this technology. Right. And the parents will absolutely just, no, my child would never do that. Right. And another thing that you've done that other families haven't done, it's actually becoming more and more rare. You're a whole family too. Right. And so your parents, your children had what's the word I'm looking for? Because it's not luxury or privilege that I'm looking for, but your children were fortunate, really, to have 2 parents for their whole life. Right. There's been no divorce. There's been, I'm not saying that your family's perfect, because no family's perfect. No, but what I am saying is that whatever the 2 of you did to stay together and keep that love alive was an advantage to your family. Right. And so your children have a very whole perspective, and they have a leg up
Right.
Going out into the world. But we, the dangers, I couldn't imagine, because I'm not a parent, and I get that a lot. Like, how can you speak to this because you're not a parent? I deal with kids a lot.
Sure.
And I deal with the most broken kids
Mm-hmm.
a lot. And then I go into the homes and see how they're being raised and what their parents are like. I mean, I don't have to have kids to understand that.
Right.
I'm a person. I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised, like I know I can see it from the kid's perspective. And it turns into, these things turn into a self-defense nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that parents have such a hard time keeping up.
Right. Yeah.
Keeping up with, what's the latest danger that's happening to my kids today?
Right. Yes.
And I can see how that would be extremely frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that if every parent or set of parents would truly invest in a self-defense education for their children, starting when they're young teenagers, I think that you would see, and I have seen, the incredible benefits of that when they get into their 20s and 30s, and how they become parents and how they teach their children, and it becomes a culture.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. And I don't want to sound defensive. What I am saying is, like, I really agree with everything that you're doing here. Like, I'm saying that we are up against it. When it comes to society and things that have been put in our way, and phones and the things that are stumbling blocks for us. And I'm wondering, like, how do we navigate that with societal view of protection? Mm-hmm. How do we navigate that with what's too early, what's too late? How do we navigate that with, what are the pitfalls that my kids are getting into now already, and I need to protect them based upon other things? Those are the things that you start running through your mind as you're raising your child, or as you're getting as a husband too. I think about my wife being protected all the time. It makes me nervous. Like, if she's at the house and she's like, hey, I need to run to the grocery store. It's, 10 o'clock. I'm like, I'm coming with you.
Yeah.
She's like, I can do it. And I'm like, I don't care if you can do it or not. I'm coming with you. Like, that's the reality.
There's, I think that one of the reasons that we were safer when we were kids is because there wasn't the mental health decline that there is now. And this was part of the human trafficking training that I took, and this was the most fascinating part of it. When things like porn become readily available, I mean, when we were kids, like, when did we ever get access to that, right?
We had like a scrambled TV channel.
You had to we had a scrambled TV channel. Even when we had cable, there were parental controls on what channels you could access.
The passed around magazine.
There was, the occasional Playboy that maybe your uncle gave you or something. It was it was a lot more difficult. With porn being so available now, what is happening with human trafficking is, and your human traffickers and your people that take advantage of these children they don't look like what you think they look like. They are, most people who take advantage of young children in a human trafficking scenario are white men, middle-aged men. And what is happening is there's a paraphilia that they are trying to satisfy. Something that they've seen because they've been watching porn on the internet. That's what they think that sex should be, especially if they've been doing it from a young age. So the generation that we have now, they've always had access to this stuff, right? So now they have this sort of skewed idea of what sex is or what it should be. And then they're trying to satisfy a paraphilia. So when these men get caught, do you know who they're most afraid of?
Who's that?
Their wife.
Oh, okay.
They're most afraid of their wife. And so you'll see them in interrogation rooms going, you're not going to tell my wife about this, are you? Because their biggest fear is getting a divorce, blowing up their family, and losing half their assets.
Sure. Yes.
That's their biggest fear.
Of course.
But they've skewed their mind with this porn, and they've developed these paraphilias that they feel like they need to satisfy, and their wife won't do it. So they go out and they find it somewhere else.
Yep.
And then eventually porn doesn't become enough. Eventually rough sex isn't enough, or all the other things that they're seeing, on these porn sites, it doesn't become enough. And then eventually they get into the realm of children. And there's no coming back from that. It is so hard to rehabilitate someone who starts taking sexual advantage of children.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
And this is where it started.
Yeah.
And the internet is where it started. Okay. And I'm not saying that those technologies aren't needed or necessary. I'm just saying that we have to curb ourselves here. Right. And we have to have some kind of, like, in my opinion, we have to have some kind of like spiritual, like, grounding, like foundation. And we have to be able to say, that is wrong. And we have to be able to call people out and say, that is wrong. And we have to be able to sit I've had friends of my own who have been in marriages and they've discovered that their husband now has a porn addiction.
Right.
And they've had to walk through that journey together. It's a problem. It's a huge problem. And then it becomes a self-defense nightmare because now you have parents that are like, why are these predators showing up at my house? And also, how did you get my address? And then they find out that their kid gave it to them on a gaming console, the headset thing, or through an Instagram app, because these people are making their children feel wanted, needed, and seen.
Right.
Right. And so that's how it all comes to a head. And so I truly believe that a spiritual grounding and a self-defense education and really transparent, honest conversations with our children is how we get in front of this.
Yeah, the last part I think is huge. Just the conversations, just in general, ask questions.
We've lost the village.
Yeah.
We've completely lost the village when it comes to our kids. And now we've gotten to the point where this has become so rampant and people's minds have become so rotten that we don't even know who we can trust with our children anymore. And I babysit a lot. I have a lot of friends with kids. They know me, we have a relationship, but I tell them all the time, I'm like, you need to have a camera on who's watching your children in your house. Have cameras in your house.
Right.
And that curbs a lot, right? I mean, anybody that has a problem with you having a camera on them while their children are in your care, that's a huge red flag.
Oh, for sure. Yes. You don't know who to protect. I mean, you don't know who to trust anymore, right? Somebody's
you really
walking
don't.
in, you're paying them money, and first off, they're in your house by themselves.
Yes.
Really.
Well, and because we don't know who to trust with our children, we've lost the village. And now parents are more stressed out than ever because they don't get a break. Like, I've literally, I have some friends that I've known for, about 15 years.
Yeah.
No one has ever babysat their children. They will not allow it. So they get no break.
Right.
They get no date night. They get no, do you see where I'm going with this? Like, where has the village gone? And so now we have to kind of course correct that. And I really think that it begins with the things that I mentioned, but it also, we have to get past this toxic feminist culture where women feel like they have to do everything and they don't need a man for anything.
Right.
And I know that we need to get past it because I was that person. I was a toxic feminist in my 20s and didn't appreciate what men were for and didn't appreciate, the necessity for them in our society. And I think that there are so many women that never outgrew that. And and now we have this huge betification of men that will just, fall on their face for anything that a woman says and lift women up in any way possible. And I just don't agree with that anymore.
Right.
And I think it's a problem. And so I do exist in this very weird space where I'm very pro women with weapons, but I'm also very pro masculinity.
Right.
And sometimes that butts heads, and it's a hard question to answer. It's a hard thing to face sometimes.
So what are the differences between what you felt in your 20s about men versus what you feel about them now?
I think that I think there was a time for a long time when women weren't treated well. And I think that needs to be acknowledged by everyone, especially men. We were baby factories. We had no rights. We couldn't own businesses. We couldn't have our own money. We couldn't vote. There were times when we couldn't even speak. it was really wrong the way that women were treated. And I think that needed to be acknowledged. And I think it has been. But I think that we have forgotten, or we've become very unappreciative of good husbands and good fathers and like what they bring to the table and how that balance has to be there. And that's the way that it was meant to be. I think submission has a very negative connotation to it. But I think I have a really cool explanation for submission. Because that was a problem. Like, I remembered hearing that word a lot in my 20s. Well, I'm not going to submit to a man. Why should I have to submit to a man? Especially if he's not doing this and that, especially if he's not giving me this and that, right? And I heard that a lot. And I remember going, yeah, I shouldn't have to do that either. And then I got into my 30s and I got really tired of being alone. Can I just say it?
Yeah.
I got really tired of being alone, and I'm thinking, what is going on here? And so I started talking to my friends, my girlfriends that were in, good relationships and good marriages. And I would go over to their house for dinner and I would talk to their husbands, and I started to see like this pattern and this common trend of really good submission. And so I got a dictionary out one day and I read the definition of submission. It's mind-blowing because there's several definitions of submission. And so the first definition is to acquiesce, or no, actually that's not the first definition. The first definition of submission is to consent to a certain treatment. You're submitting to a treatment, okay? Well, if you have been wise and you're choosing a man that will speak up on behalf of those who can't speak for themselves, who has discernment and wisdom, who makes good financial decisions, who is kind to you, who listens to you, who is present with you. Like, why wouldn't you consent to the way that person is going to treat you? Because they're going to treat you well, right? And then the second definition of submission is to acquiesce to a higher authority, okay? Well, men are supposed to be leaders of the household, okay? It's the truth, right? Men are physically stronger, okay? And then if you have all those qualities that I just mentioned, that person is probably going to be a really good leader. And so you should want to acquiesce to that authority. It shouldn't be that difficult, okay?
Right.
You shouldn't be that prideful enough to go, this person doesn't deserve to lead my home. That's silly.
Right.
Then the third definition of submission is to present a proposal. So you, as the mom, as the wife, as the vice president of the house, you get to say to your husband sometimes, hey, I don't really feel like that's the best decision for our family, because everybody's human and everybody errs, right? So you get to say, as the wife, I think we need to talk about this before we make a final decision, and I'd like to give you my perspective. So in essence, you are submitting a proposal. Right? And so the husband, who's a good leader, who has all these wonderful qualities that I mentioned, is going to hear you, and now you're going to make a decision together. Okay? 3 things, right? That's what true submission is. But there's a fourth component that isn't in the dictionary. And this is the self-defense component of submission. Your wife cannot be with you 24/7, right? Okay, you have things to do, she has things to do, right? All the stuff. When you're away from the household, the protection is gone, right? The main protector, because that's your main mission, is provision and protection, right? So the main person who is executing this mission is gone. She has to step into that, and now she has to provide protection for the children. It's her sub-mission. It's her secondary mission. Now she has to step into that. This is what I'm trying to get moms and women to understand, is submission is not doing whatever your husband says. Submission is presenting a proposal. Submission is choosing a good partner who's going to be a good leader and treat you well so that you can consent to that treatment. And submission is stepping into your secondary mission of protection and provision for your children when the main protector is gone. And you have to do it for your wife too. If your wife is gone on a business trip or visiting her mom or whatever, and the kids come home from school and they have a bad day, what's her primary mission? Supporting and nurturing. Guess who has to be the supporter and the nurturer now? You have to step into your own submission.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
And so I can't tell you how many women I've explained to it to that way, And they're like, oh my God, I never thought of it that way.
Right.
And I'm like, because it hasn't been presented to you properly.
Right.
And that's what it is. And sometimes it makes my job difficult because I'm telling women, you have to be prepared for this over here, but you can relax a little bit over here.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you have to understand that when you can relax into your femininity, and then when you need to kind of come out and be that kind of that vice president, that second soldier, that, team member in your family that can step into that role and execute it proficiently and well.
So when do you think that really started to set in with you? You said your 30s, you said I started to feel alone. But this whole wrapping of the bow around this thing, congratulations on your recent engagement, by the way.
Thank you very much.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, all my friends, they started to get married. They started to find relationships. I mean, not every one of them found a good one, but a lot of them did. And I started to think about, and what's even more interesting was that a couple of them were actually like, listen, some of the skills that you taught me were very helpful in my relationship because my husband doesn't get frustrated with me because I make poor decisions when I'm out by myself. My husband doesn't get, he's impressed at how situationally aware I am and how much I can talk about weapons and guns and how we're a united front now teaching our kids that. Right. And I didn't even realize that I was contributing to that. I didn't realize how important that was in a marriage until they told me. And so now that's a whole different component of Clearing the Chamber that we offer is we do offer that sort of niche marriage counseling, right? We're not marriage counselors, but when people come to us in this specific issue of self-defense, we can sit a couple down and go, hey, let's talk about why you're so anti this. And a lot of times it's because you fear what you don't know.
Right.
And so once you can get that other spouse that's the anti, and it's not always the wife, by the way, most of the time it is, but sometimes it's not. And then if you get that person educated, because education is it's the solution to so many problems. Right. And so once you get that person educated, that wife or that husband, educated and on the level, it's not a problem anymore.
So what happens when you start talking to these people about these different solutions you're coming up with for X, Y, and Z, and someone just has it in their brain the entire time? It's like, I don't really care what you're saying. I think the best solution is just get rid of guns altogether, right? You keep coming up with, hey, we could be better at this or better at that or better at that. It would be better if we just took it all together all away. What do you say to those people?
There is specific data evidence that guns are not the problem. And I put that report in front of him. I actually carry it in my notebook. So in Texas, they have a convictions report. In the first line, they come out with it every year for the previous year. And the first column is everything that you can be convicted for in the state of Texas, from shoplifting to murder.
Right.
Okay. The second column is how many convictions there were that year for that crime. And the third column is how many people who were licensed to carry were committed that crime. So in 2023, I believe we had 47,000 convictions in the state of Texas. And less than 1% of those convictions were licensed to carry holders. Gun owners with an education are not the problem.
So your solution to them is like, hey, look, let's not take them away. Let's educate people on them.
Exactly. And I think that if we put funding toward, if we put taxpayer funding toward gun education, I think you would see an incredible result in the next 5 to 10 years. They'll never do it. So now we just have to do it on our own. But also, I retort to them with, okay, well, if we got rid of all the guns, what are you going to do when somebody breaks in your house?
Right.
And you have nothing to defend yourself.
Physically, they're stronger or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, you're really leaving yourself, out at a disadvantage. I've taken quite a few anti-gunners out to the range, and I've seen that their minds change just because they're like, oh, well, I can do this. A lot of times, the only reason that they're anti-gun is because they fear what they don't know, like we talked about before. And it's not my fault that you're afraid to learn something. So I'm not going to give up my most fundamental right because you're afraid to learn it.
Right.
And that's just the deal, right? I also get the comparison a lot. Well, they're like, well, if I have to register my car and if I have to get a driver license, then you should have to register your gun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? Driving isn't a constitutionally protected right.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel that strongly about it, go vie for an amendment of the Constitution, at the Texas legislature.
Right.
But people have to understand, and we saw this a lot over the last 4 or 5 years, especially during COVID with lockdowns. Like, you have to understand that freedom is freedom for everybody, even if you don't like them. The First Amendment, free speech, is for everybody, even if you don't like what they say.
Right.
I don't like a lot of what people say, but it's not my problem. And hate speech is free speech.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Absolutely, from both sides. And look, I'm a country boy. I know how I was raised and everything like that. So I'm trying to be protagonist a little bit, in some of this. But for some of those people that you would say, hey, look, I think we need to get some tax dollars to go ahead and start educating people on some of this, right? If I am on the other side of that coin, I could take that and say, well, now, if you took that column on the far right and said 1% of people with guns are committing crimes, or 1% of people that are licensed carriers are committing crimes, well, if I just start making more people licensed, all I could potentially be doing is educating the criminals, right? Getting more people the access to carry guns, which is going to make that number on the far right start to go up. Was that an accurate statement?
It's really not an accurate statement, because if you look at the things that LTC holders were convicted of, it's very easy and probable and plausible that it was, a misunderstanding of the law, or frankly, it could have even been a biased conviction. I'll give you an example. In the state of Texas, you have the right to file a complaint with the AG's office if you feel like you are barred from carrying on property that is owned by the city, state, or a political subdivision. So we saw this with the State Fair of Texas. We had a shooting at the State Fair of Texas the year before last. I believe it was in 2023. Yes. I think it was in 2023.
Yeah.
Before that, there had not been a shooting at the state fair since the 80s. And in the 80s, it was illegal for you to have guns at the state fair. And somebody still got one in and committed that crime.
Right.
So there's your, reason number one. Okay. Well, then it became legal for you to carry at the state fair if you were licensed to carry. And then we had a shooting in 2023. People, licensed carry holders, went to help. Okay. And it wasn't an active shooter situation. It was like two people had a beef. Right. Yeah. And they were taking it out at the state fair. Okay. Well, now the agency that, the property management agency that runs the State Fair of Texas said, you can't carry your guns here anymore. So complaints were filed with the AG's office because that's public property.
Right.
That's not private property. And so AG Paxton said, went to the property management company and said, if you don't course correct this, I'm going to take you to court.
Yeah.
So he tried to file an injunction on this. Okay. So then you had Judge Emily, I think her last name is Wolowski, a Dallas judge, was able to block an injunction from the Attorney General of the state of Texas over a constitutionally protected right. That's biased conviction right there.
Right.
That's biased. She doesn't understand the Constitution. You have an elected judge who does not understand the Constitution of the United States of America, that doesn't understand the laws regarding firearms in the state of Texas, and doesn't understand public versus private property. That's a problem.
Yep.
So if you dove into all those cases where LTC holders were convicted, I would say that would probably be a problem. I would say that some of it was disorderly conduct. So if you commit disorderly conduct, which can be anything from cursing in public and inciting breach of the peace to peeping Tom stuff to physically fight. I mean, it's a very broad term in the law, right?
Right.
So if you get yourself into that kind of kerfluffle, which a lot of people with egos do, and you happen to have a gun on you, well, now you have a disorderly conduct conviction and you have your gun on you. It's a problem.
Right.
Right. So I would argue that tooth and nail.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying that all of those LTC holders are innocent at all.
Yeah.
I'm saying that even sometimes LTC holders can make mistakes, but in the grand scheme of things, you're seeing here, there's a data-driven report that shows you that people with a gun education are criminals far less often. And furthermore, the CDC did a study, I believe in 2017, that showed that licensed carry holders across the entire nation commit less crime than law enforcement. We are not the problem.
Well, let me ask you this. You talk about trying to get people trained up on guns. And I noticed a lot of the focus when I went to your website was on women in general, right? We talked about them and you yourself being trained and learning and going through this. Why this focus specific? I saw that there's some charities and things that you have on that you focus on. Why the focus on women's handgun?
I noticed that when I moved out of our bubble, our little Greenville Lone Oak bubble,
right?
And it didn't take long to notice it, that women were a very underserved community in this regard. And the classes that were being marketed to women were very cartoonish. They weren't the training that you were getting wasn't real. It wasn't accurate. It wasn't truthful, in my opinion, from what you're actually going to get, right? So they're marketing things like pepper spray and, these little bulldog keychains with the pointy ends. And I'm not saying that those things couldn't be effective.
Right.
I'm just saying that you have to be in close quarters to get that done, which you're already at a disadvantage as a woman being in close quarters with a man who is wanting to physically assault you. You're already at a disadvantage. I wanted to bring women real, accurate, scenario-based, right? All of these classes that were marketed to women were like, it's just death by PowerPoint.
Right.
You need to get them out into a field, and how fast can you run? Like, this isn't just about weapons training. This is about women, especially men too, but women especially need to understand that your physical condition means something. And so in a world where people are relying on Ozempic as the first line of defense for obesity, you need to understand that your physical condition matters. So you thought you had nearly no chance of beating a man in a physical fight when you're, 23 and at the prime of your life. Imagine being 38 or 42 or 48 and now you're fat and dumpy and you don't ever spend any time at the gym and you don't ever walk and you don't ever work on any of this stuff. You're like, there's no way that you're going to win. Yeah. So your physical condition matters too, right? You need to go to the gym. You need to work on strength training. You need to be able to, the best martial arts, in my opinion, that a woman could ever take is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because almost every single physical fight goes to the ground.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to defend yourself on the ground, you got a problem. And I'll give you a prime example of that. There was a young girl named Aubrey who lived in Washington State. She's now a Texas resident. When she lived in Washington State, she was in her early 20s and she was a motorcycle enthusiast. But she was also really smart because she got her Washington concealed carry license. And she went as a young girl who, most young girls are not even thinking about this. They're thinking about their next date or their next Louis Vuitton purse or their Instagram profile, right? She was very forward thinking and got her CCW in Washington and then got into a road rage situation. And this is national news. You can look it up. Made national news. And she was in a traffic jam, if I remember correctly. And the guy behind her was getting upset with her because she wouldn't move forward. But I think she was trying to leave some room between her and this car because she was on a motorcycle. And you know how hard it is to see motorcyclists. He was getting mad at her. He got out of the car and pushed her off the bike and started beating the crap out of her on the side of a major highway. And he was on top of her. She had to lift up because your physical condition, she couldn't get to her gun because he was so heavy.
Yeah.
So women are typically stronger in their legs and men are typically stronger in their upper body. She had to lift her butt off the ground to be able to suck her tummy in to get to her gun, and she shot him, killed him.
Yeah.
Come to find out, he had a rap sheet a mile long of domestic violence convictions. He was a woman beater, terrible, terrible human.
Yeah.
But that right there kind of shows you that education saved her life.
Right.
As a young girl. And we should start teaching kids this at 12.
Has she been doing jiu-jitsu or something like that? Or was that?
She, I don't know, but I've seen her and talked to her, personally. And she's in great physical shape.
Just training all the time.
So there's something to that. So self-defense is not just a game of weapons. Okay. I've seen plenty of fat Mexican food eating all the time, meal team 6 guys, right, out there, like with their bellies hanging over their belt buckles, right? But but they've got a kit on, they've got a holster, they're bad, they're badass. That's what they'll tell you, but they couldn't do a push-up or walk a mile on a treadmill to save their life.
Right.
How effective are you truly going to be if you have to move from one place, to the other in a physical confrontation? So those kind of people, their first line of defense is always going to be the weapon. They're not going to think about de-escalation tactics. They're not going to think about situational awareness. Because they don't have the physical condition for that, right? So the self-defense game is a myriad of things that you have to think about. And it's a lot of training, especially it's a mental game. I mentioned the cognitive load earlier. Like when you're in a situation of duress, your stress level is through the roof. Your adrenaline dump there. You're not going to have the same fine motor skills that you had because your blood is going to be shunted from the limbs into the center of the body to power the heart and the lungs and all that, and your vision. You're going to get tunnel vision, right? A lot of people don't understand these things. And because they don't understand these things, they don't know what their body is doing and they panic.
Right.
And so instead of flee and fight, you're going to freeze. And people who freeze are people who die. This is an education that every grown-up, every parent needs to have. And it doesn't really take that long.
So do you do other things besides just training for the handguns? Do you do these things in your courses? Do you give somebody like, hey, we're going to do, push-ups, sit-ups, core exercises. These are, the types of moves that people are going to put on you. These are defense things to block somebody from getting into your zone or whatever. Do you do those things?
We don't do push-ups and sit-ups and things like that. But we do encourage people. I have martial arts instructors that I work with. We do hands-on self-defense classes because you need to understand, what do you do if somebody's already, we have the 21-foot rule, right? Because the average human can clear 21 feet in 1 second, right? So that's what I teach women is when you're scanning your zone, I even say go 30 feet, just in case, 21 to 30 feet. Does anybody look like they could be a threat to you if you do a quick scan, right? The guy with his 2 kids, probably not a problem.
Right.
Okay. Female walking alone to her car might not be an issue. Okay. But the guy in the trench coat with the sunglasses that looks, you never know. Okay. So you just need to kind of scan. So you need to see who your potential threats could be. I tell people, get into a martial art if you can, if you have time for it. If not, you need to do things that are going to, walking even is amazing because you need to do things that are going to keep you from getting winded too quickly.
Do you take martial arts?
Okay. Yeah, I did. I took Muay Thai for 6 years. I was an MMA fighter for 6 years. That included a little bit of jiu-jitsu. So I learned how to ground fight. Obviously learned how to fight standing up, learned how to throw a punch, learned how to go for the soft parts. That was an incredible education for me. Got injured a lot, doing it, but you're always going to fall back on your lowest level of training. Okay. So even though I don't do that, I don't fight anymore. I box in my gym, right? Or I box in my garage. I have a boxing thing with the gloves and stuff. And I do that in my garage to keep me, on top of that. Right. So, and another component of this too is, unless we have the physical wherewithal and the physical means to back up the things that we believe in, we don't really get freedom.
Right.
Right. I mean, the Bill of Rights is just words on paper unless you have the physical means to back it up. I mean, that's what it's about. And that takes women and men doing that and being aware of that and kind of putting in that time. So how you spend your time is very important. So I would encourage people that are listening to this podcast to go, what does my day look like? Go into the settings on your phone and see how long you spend doom scrolling every day. And if you took an hour away from that and went and took a BJJ class or watching the videos on YouTube, if you can't afford it, just getting even seeing it, even just exposing yourself to it a little bit is better than nothing. Okay. A lot of the classes that I teach are an hour, 2 hours, or 4 hours. Okay. So, I've condensed this as condensed as it can get. Okay. And if you make the commitment on your calendar to go, oh, there's 4 classes. Well, I'm going to take 1 class a month, or I'm going to take 1 class every other month. Then your education is over in 8 months. And now you have the foundational, you should always be a student of the weapon, but now you have your foundation built and now you can go on top of it. And you can say, what are the electives, right? I want to take Preparing What You Wear. I have a class for pregnant women called How to Protect What You're Expecting, because I would get the question from pregnant women all the time. Can I train? Can I learn how to shoot a gun? I never even thought of this until I got pregnant, And so the answer is yes, you probably shouldn't do anything in your last trimester. But if you just found out you're pregnant and you're only like 8-9 weeks along and you want to take an intro to handgun class, most doctors will tell you it's fine. I've trained a lot of pregnant women. My what if scenarios class, that is airsoft pistols, scenario-based training. I'm putting you in all kinds of probable and plausible situations that you could find yourself in, including abductions, invasions, carjackings, muggings, active shooter scenarios, trying to get your gun out in a car, like dealing with all that stuff. Like that is probably my most sought after class. And people love it because it shows you how slow you are. It shows you the things that you need to improve upon. And it takes all the things, all your preconceived notions that you had before you came into that class are gone. You're like, I suck. And that's exactly how I want you to feel in that class, because I want you to know how bad you are so that you can make a change in your life and get better. And and I love seeing that. I love bringing people down so that I can lift them back up. Sure. Because your preconceived notions will get you killed.
Don't you think that society just in general is really kind of boosting up people's egos when it comes to fighting, our self-abilities? Like I see these fights all the time in these movies, and it's like some really small woman and she's taking out like 6 dudes in a row in the same deal. And I'm like, and my wife and I look at each other and be like, and she's like, man, I wish, but I wonder if people start to believe that stuff, where they think I don't need handgun classes because I can just protect myself, or I'm tough enough, or I'd take that guy out or whatever, It's like, I think there was a radio disc jockey that came out the other day, and these women kept coming onto his radio show and calling him weak and I beat you up, or you're not that tough, or blah, blah, blah. And he challenged all of them. There was like 30 of them. And he said, I'll challenge you one after another all the way through this. And if any of you beat me, I'll give you this prize or whatever. And he beat up like 30 women in a row, like in this box, and they all signed the waivers or whatever. And it was just like, it was kind of an eye-opening thing for a lot of people. Like, one, why would you do this as a man? Like, what are you trying to prove? The other thing was like, I'm sure there were guys out there who were like, I'm tired of hearing this myself.
I fully agree with that guy.
Yeah.
Because you have to take the toxic feminists down a notch.
Yeah.
You have to move people back into reality. And if that means that you kick 30 women's asses because they signed up for it,
right,
do it.
Yeah.
Because they think that they can do something that they likely can't do, and it's going to get them hurt or killed.
Right. I agree with you.
It's going to get them hurt or killed. People put me on too much of a pedestal. My students do. People that I serve with in the military do. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm very capable and I believe in myself, but my mission is to teach you realistic ways in which you can save your own life.
Survive.
I'm not like, Tomb Raider over here.
Right.
That's not what I am. And people really need to like know and understand that. I've just been studying this, for a long time. So I have a lot of knowledge up here that I can impart on you, but like I'm not going to, if somebody walked in here right now and shot us all, my gun's unloaded right there. I mean, we're all dead.
Yeah.
That's the reality of this situation.
Right.
Could we have a better chance if that gun was loaded in on me? Sure. But that doesn't mean that we're going to win. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to win, And another point that you said, do you remember Riley Gaines, the swimmer? She was the NCAA swimmer that lost her title to the transgender person, Leah Thomas or whatever. I think his name is Will, actually. She testified before Congress. She's been one of the largest proponents of women's sports ever since this happened. And she testified before Congress and was like, listen, women's sports is important because, listen, I'm sitting before you today, probably the most decorated swimmer NCAA has ever seen as a woman in women's sports. My husband was also a swimmer and doesn't have nearly the accolades that I have, but he would beat me every time. She was like, it doesn't matter. There's a huge difference between women and men. And it's very evident and it's very common sense. And we've allowed that narrative to be hijacked by a bunch of psychopaths.
Right. Yes. Well, people that are just removed from reality, at the end of the day, they've just pulled themselves back and they've looked at social media or they looked at movies or they looked at these other things that have seeded them to think I can do anything. Right. And look, you could find a man or you can find a woman that you could probably pit them up and they might, and the woman might win on that scenario. But at the end of the day too, it's like I'm looking at a national average for things that are going on around there where I don't want to put my wife at a disadvantage. I don't want to put her in a spot. And when it comes to security for her life and her family and keeping us together, like so we can continue another 28 years together, right?
Yes.
Like, I want to make sure that I got her a gun a couple years ago, right? And was taught her myself how to do this, right? And so at the same time, I want to make sure that, look, my mom was one of the first handgun instructors in the state of Texas when I was 10 years old, and so
your mom was? My
mom was.
I love that.
Yeah. And so I asked my dad about it, and he was like, look, I want your mom to be in there, and I want her to learn how to do things. And if I'm not here, I want her to be able to do this, right? And so she loved it so much, she got to where she was doing the instruction part of it, right? And so her and three of her buddies three of her girlfriends got in there and started, teaching, And so I want the same thing for my wife, because she realized really quickly, hitting a target from 30 yards is not as easy as you think it is. Hitting a target from 10 yards is not as easy as you think it is if you don't know how to do it. I mean, so teaching those things to keep people safe, right, are a huge leap from what the movies do. Like I see these people pull out these automatic weapons and they just wear on people. Well, all of those have recoil and they're going to go to the sky. The longer you hold the trigger down, it's just going to recoil straight up in the air. And it's just not reality.
It's not. And that's and that's something that a lot of people don't understand when they say, women should be in combat, and things like that. I mean, it might surprise you to know that I don't really agree with that very much. And you made a really good point about, hitting a target from 30 yards away isn't easy. And I just literally this weekend, I competed in the Governor's 20 competition, which is the shooting competition between the military branches in Texas. And so there were 126 shooters. I came in 61st. Okay. So I was like dead in the middle. And and there was all this praise and they're like, oh, you're doing, because I'm usually the only female that competes. This year there were 3. And, they're like, oh, you're so good and this is so great. And, but look, women can, you're showing everybody that women can compete in men's things. And I'm like, this is so much different. This is different. This is not, for the most part, a physical skill. This is a mental skill and a skill of precision.
Right.
Okay. It's different. Now, you want to know why I came in 61st? Because, well, several reasons, but one of them was because we had a drill where we had to run. So I'm running against, and you have to understand that these people are operators.
Right.
These are combat veterans. These are Green Berets. These are, legit operators that I'm competing against. So I beat half of them. So I'm good at what I do. But what about the other half? Okay. So there was a drill where we had to run like 100 yards, get to the line, make your gun ready, and burn down steel. Well, which part do you think I was good at? Burning down the steel, right? Because it's precision, accuracy, okay? Do you think that I came in first on the running part? No. Okay. The same thing happened the year before. I broke my toe a week before the competition. They did a drill where you had to run 50 yards to a table, grab your mag, run another 50 yards back to the center, burn down the steel. I was like, the only way that I'm going to get points on this is if I'm faster at burning down the steel than everybody else. So you have to understand your limitations as a woman and a competitor.
Right.
But am I accepted and loved in the space? Yes.
Yeah.
I bet this is my 3rd year competing and I get better every year. I shot better this year than I have any other year. Okay. But as long as the targets are static and I don't have to run, I'm really good at it. Do you see what I'm saying? But so we have to, as women, be able to admit those things. But yeah, I mean, people were warning other people about me at that competition. They're like, don't think that she can't shoot. Okay. So you better be hitting your bullseyes, right? But on the running stuff, don't worry about it. She's like way back there, But it's still, though, such an important education from the standpoint of anticipating the threat, knowing how to demand your boundaries. Like one of the things that I teach in my class, in my classes, especially my what if classes, is if somebody is making you uncomfortable and you give them a specific instruction and they do not follow it, that tells you everything you need to know, right? If somebody is following you in the parking garage of your apartment complex, if you speed up, they speed up, kind of thing or whatever, or somebody's trying to talk to you while you're getting groceries out of your car and you say, please don't come any closer, and they come closer, that's everything that you need to know about that person. If they're not willing to follow instructions that they know are going to make you more comfortable in an interaction with them, it's a problem, and you need to be on high alert, right? There's a great book that I always tell my students to read called The Gift of Fear. It's by Gavin DeBecker. And in my opinion, it's the best situational awareness book you'll ever read. And it was life-changing for me. I took a lot of stuff out of that book and started implementing it, into my classes. But it talks about everything from, dealing with strangers talking to you in certain situations, all the way up to domestic violence. And in that book, it says, if you let a man, if you're a woman and you let a man in a relationship hit you once, you're a victim. If you let him hit you twice, you're a willing participant.
Right.
Now you have a problem. Now you're going to be conditioned for that behavior. And I have a nonprofit, a 501c3 called WADE, which is the Women's Awareness and Defense Endeavor. And we've taken 139 women out of domestic violence relationships.
Wow.
Now, here's what I mean by that. Okay, because a lot of people will say, oh, that's so great that you did that. No, let me tell you, I go into their house and I take them out of it. It's very dangerous. Now, luckily, I haven't been attacked or, anything like that, because a lot of times abusers from a psychological perspective are weak people.
Right.
And so if they're confronted with somebody that they can tell just by their energy that, oh, they're not going to deal with my crap, usually they kind of just lay back and let you do your thing, right? But I will go into your house and I will move you out of it.
Right.
And I will take you to a shelter. I'll take you to a safe house. I'll take you to your family's house. And it's wild to me how, I was brought up in a house of domestic violence. And it was always mind-boggling to me how no one would get involved. Like, my grandparents knew this was happening, but nobody wanted to get involved.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to help. Nobody wanted to stop what was going on. It was a problem. And so I'm like, somebody has to step in and help. We've tied law enforcement's hands with liability. We've made them out to be the bad guy. And so now the resources for women who are totally getting their asses beat in their house every day is a problem. So I'm like, I'm just going to go in and get you out. But you have to be ready to go. So I go in, I get them out. We help them. We work with other nonprofit organizations to help them get a wardrobe, help them find jobs, help them get toiletries, help them with their vehicles. I mean, nobody can get a job if they don't have a car, right? So we help them with all those things. And then we also help them get counseling. And once they've gotten the proper amount of counseling and their counselor says, hey, this person is in a good headspace, we also teach them self-defense. We run them through my whole academy. And I really feel like we've solved a problem that politicians, law enforcement, and other domestic violence nonprofits are not willing to acknowledge, because 139 women have been out of these domestic violence relationships and only 2 have gone back.
Wow. That's a great
If you look at domestic violence statistics, 80-something% of domestic violence victims go back to their abuser.
Do you think your own personal journey with abuse in a household has caused you to take this path?
Oh, yeah. I've always had an intrinsic desire to protect people. And I've had to do it. I mean, I had a younger brother. I have a brother that's 7 years younger than me. And I just, my mission in life was to protect him from all of the things that were going on in our house. It was a nightmare. Now, it wasn't as bad as some of the things that I've seen doing WADE. but it was bad.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to say, I don't want to sit here and make it out like my life was the most horrible, but it was really bad. And I read a book. I think I was like, actually, I can't remember when I read it, but I want to say I was in my early 30s when I read it. But it was a book called Dangerous Prayers by Craig Rochelle. And I highly recommend it because it's about like, a lot of people want their calling, but when they ask for it, they don't like it, right? When God gives it to you, you don't like it. And I read that book and it validated so many of the things that I had been dealing with because I really struggled as like, I wanted to be married and I wanted to have a family. And like, those are the things that I wanted, when I got into my 30s, when I was done being a toxic feminist in my 20s, right? And that kept being denied to me. And I couldn't understand why. And it was because I believe that I had truly asked God for my calling. And my calling is to protect people. And my calling is to teach people how to protect themselves. And that had to be the mission. That had to be the mission. And it wasn't until the summer of 2023 that God said, okay, here's your person. Like, I'm ready for you to kind of settle down now, and it's a really cool testimony to like go, well, and I wasn't always patient like nobody ever is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was God's like, here, now it's time for you to have your person.
And I hate to put a bow on it like this or even, try to recap your story because I don't want to discredit anything that you've been through. But I remember you being younger as just being like this firecracker, right? And it was always like you said, the toxic feminist of, guys were just bad people just in general, right? And just from the outside looking in, it's easy for a lot of guys to say, I just don't want to deal with that kind of a human being that is always pot-shotting me or doing something like that, But no one really knows what goes on in someone else's house until the door's closed.
Right.
And so to be able to see that kind of thing and see how that has really kind of shaped your life, and then how you've actually come through the other side is beautiful.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think that a lesson that I learned is that fathers are important. I didn't have a good one. And sometimes, you see the absence of fathers a little bit differently in boys and girls. And in girls, a lot of times it's what you saw when I was younger, right? And there's a defense mechanism there because you think like psychologically, well, if my dad didn't want me, who else is going to want me? Like, who's supposed to love you more than your dad? Like, nobody.
Right.
And, but it was, but my dad wasn't just a bad dad. He was a scary dad. He was really scary.
Okay.
And so you have to, you are always on high alert to defend yourself from anyone that's like him. You know what I mean? And, it was a lot of hard lessons, to learn. And I had to there was like a period of time in my life where I had to like walk around and make some apologies, to people, to men specifically that I had treated terribly because I was taking out what my dad did on them and they didn't deserve that, And so that's another really actually a good point that maybe some listeners could take away is, look, if you encounter a woman like that, dig a little deeper and go, hey, is there something else like going on here? Because there's an issue in the past, that's making this person feel this way or act this way. I tell people a lot, especially in law enforcement, when I sit down and talk to cops, I'm like, if you come across a woman that is proficient with a weapon, 90% chance there's a trauma there. Like women just don't get into guns because they love it.
Right.
That hasn't really ever been part of our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm not saying every woman. I mean, I learned how to shoot not out of necessity. Like my grandpa legitimately taught me because like he had an interest in it. I spent a lot of time with him. I enjoyed him. I learned too. Right. So even though I did have a trauma, me learning to shoot did not stem from that trauma. It was organic and familial. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of women who are really good with guns and weapons, there's a trauma there if you really look, and that could be an indicator, that, hey, maybe I need to be more gentle, with this person in certain situations, or maybe I need to understand their trigger. Triggers aren't really, my triggers aren't your responsibility by any stretch of the imagination. They belong to me. The trauma is not my fault, but the healing is my responsibility, right? And it's not fair, but it's just the truth.
Yeah.
If I wanted any kind of life, if I wanted the life that I wanted, I had work to do over here before I could do this. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But in the course of doing that work, I got to educate so many people, so many women. I have over 10,000 students under my belt. And I have really enjoyed that. I've really enjoyed seeing that come into fruition.
Right.
And I'm hoping that those women, and some of those are men, will take what I've taught them and take that into their own families and their own kids and their own grandkids and their friends and their family. That's another thing that I preach on is we cannot be afraid to have these conversations with our friends and family. We have to do it gently. It's a touchy subject. But we do have to have, this used to be a common conversation, that we would have a conversation about, when self-defense is appropriate and when it's not. And then one day that conversation just went away and became very frowned upon and negative. And it's not. It's an education that young people deserve.
Yeah.
Because they have to understand how emotional intelligence, and they have to understand good communication, which they don't. Do you know how many, I was a hiring manager, for a long time at a company. Do you know how many like Gen Zers like hate to talk on the phone?
Yes. Yeah, we talk about it all the time.
They won't talk on the phone.
Yeah, it's a text. I sent you a text. I sent you an email. It's over.
And they won't talk on the phone, and they won't look you in the eye.
Yeah.
My nephew does it. And it's not, I'm not mad at him about it, but I'm just saying that they're so used to communicating with people on one of these or behind a computer screen or whatever that they don't understand how to do what we're doing.
Yeah.
And looking people in the eye and actually getting a little bit emotional about what you're talking about. God, I was crying just a second ago. I was trying to like hold it in, but none of these things are bad. None of these things are bad. It's part of the human experience. It's part of the human condition. And if you don't feel, then how are you ever going to be able to understand how someone else is acting? If you don't know how to feel emotions.
Yeah.
But like my nephew will sit across the dinner table and I'll have a whole conversation with him and he won't look at me in my eye one time. And I'm like, dude,
we're right here.
Come on.
Lock up.
But it's a problem because when you look somebody in the eye, you feel a different thing. Your brain works in a different, capacity. And so it's, I worry really bad about this generation.
Well, I'll say this, I appreciate your vulnerability in that moment as well. But I'll just say from God's perspective too, look, man, we're just not super mature at an early age, and it takes us a while to kind of start to self-reflect and understand that there are some things out there in the world, and we just remove ourselves from things that just don't work well, right? That's how we do things. Oh, that's hard on me, or whatever. The reason I'm with my wife is she brings me peace. She literally brings me peace, and so the older I get, the more I recognize man, maybe I kind of quickly brushed something off, or maybe I didn't focus, or maybe I didn't ask, how are things? How can I help you? Or do you need help? Just in general. Right. And so, but from the time that we've had this conversation to the last conversation that we had years back, you seem so much more at peace now. And it is really cool to see.
Oh yeah. Learning, I think that there was always a fear of sort of leaning into your feminine. I watched my mom get taken advantage of so much because she was trying to do things the right way. She was trying to be, she took marriage vows. She took that seriously, like even when it was detrimental, to her. She worked her butt off. She always tried to make a nice meal, it wasn't always great, but she tried all these things. And I was always really scared to lean into that because I saw how much that she got, taken advantage of. But one of the things that I learned is that, that men and women operate very differently. And you said something that made me think about it because you said, my wife brings me peace. That is that's what we are supposed to do. That's what we're supposed to do. And somewhere along the line, somebody made that less than. Somebody made, it is such an art to create a home that people want to be in, right?
Yeah.
It's such an art to be able to provide your family with a meal, like a good, healthy, wonderful, delicious meal. And somewhere along the line, somebody made that less than.
Right.
It's incredible to be able to birth children. I mean, you've seen it.
Yeah, firsthand.
It's wild.
It's amazing.
Bananas, right?
Yeah.
Like that the one, if you ever, there's a science, how they come into the different museums and these they'll set up temporary, what do you call them? Exhibits.
Yeah.
The Body Worlds one was incredible. I don't know if you ever
seen that. Yeah.
Did you see the pregnant woman?
Yep.
Okay. So if you don't know what the Body Worlds exhibit is, it's all these bodies that were donated to science, but they cut them open. You can see all of their intestines and circulatory systems and all that kind of stuff. And they did, this pregnant woman was terminal, and they got her to give her body to that. And you can see how all the organs move around to make way for this baby. It's the most incredible thing.
Yeah.
And somebody somewhere made that less than, and I bought into that. And I bought into that somewhere, between what I was seeing at home and what I was hearing from the people that I was hanging out with, because you are the 5 people that you hang out with the most, right? And I bought into all of that, and it was a lie. It's a complete lie. And so if you think about generations past, right? If you think about, during World War I and World War II, or even during the pioneer days or whatever, men were out there dealing with some of the worst shit you will ever see. Wars and dead bodies and hunger. And, you are really having to fend for yourself. And so when you came home, what would be the thing that you wanted the most? Peace. And who would provide that for you? Your wife, the mother of your children. We were put on this earth to take care of the people who were going out and doing all the things that we can't and won't do.
Right.
And now you have this society of women that think they want to do those things. And I'm telling you, you don't.
I'm just wondering, where's my bag? I'm tired of hearing, where's my bag? Where's my bag? That is so crazy. How about just find somebody that you guys can be comfortable living with for the rest of your life.
Yes.
And be happy and smile and want to enjoy their company. Where's my bag? Or are you 7 feet tall? Or are you, it's what is this? These prerequisites for a human being to be, it's just you've skewed everything, to put them in their boxes. It's crazy.
And it's what can you give me? I watched a podcast on that, and the host of it was really hilarious. And he was our grandpas worked half as hard and got twice the woman. Worked half as hard at it and got twice the woman. And there's some truth to that. There's some truth to that. Now, back then, women weren't as appreciated as they are now. That's the thing. Had we had the appreciation for women that we have now, back then, it would have been even better. And I think that would have carried over and carried over and carried over. But I see that changing. I see it changing all the time. And I think that we're in a, there's never been, in my opinion, there's never been a better time to be a woman. So I'm tired of hearing all the complaints about how bad we have it, because we don't have it bad at all. We have every single right that men have ever had. We have it. Okay. We can have our own businesses. We can have our own money. We can choose when we're having kids.
Yeah.
You know, like there's nothing. I've never been. I remember the big wage gap debate thing that happened a few years ago where they were saying women are so underpaid and blah, blah, blah. I was like, here's what you're not thinking about. Okay. What do women normally go to school for?
Mm-hmm.
Not engineering, not science. Like a lot of women weren't going for those kind of things. So you weren't getting those higher paying jobs. A lot of women had gaps in their resume from having children and all that kind of stuff. Right. But I had never, but one of the big things that I noticed is I was like, I don't think anybody's teaching you how to negotiate a contract.
Right.
Because I have never, since I was like in my mid-20s and working in the oil field, I've never been the lowest paid employee.
Mm-hmm.
Because I went in and I learned how to negotiate a contract.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned how to express what I'm worth in a way that wasn't offensive, you know, that didn't make me look like an asshole. Right. But like, here's what I'm worth and here's why I'm worth it. And here's what I'm going to do for you. And then you got to go do it. So do I think that there was ever a wage gap problem? Yeah. But I don't think it was to the extent that people were making it out to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if women, you know, want better and more high paying jobs, you have to go to school for better and more high paying things.
Mm-hmm.
You're starting to see a huge shift in women too that are getting into the trades.
Yep.
I was always a trades person. I never wanted to go to college.
Okay.
I was like, I want to go into the military and I want to do a trade. My grandpa taught me all kinds of stuff. I knew how to work on cars. I mean, I wasn't like a mechanic or anything, but I knew how to change my own oil. I knew how to work on cars. I knew how to lay bricks.
Mm-hmm.
I knew how to do light carpentry. I knew how to work on guns. Like I learned all that stuff. And that was what was more interesting to me than going to college for philosophy.
Right.
Like I didn't care about any of that stuff, right? I wanted to be a tradesperson. And so you're seeing more women that are getting into the trades. There was one woman, I can't remember what state it was. She opened a freaking brilliant, if you ask me. She opened a car repair shop with a nail salon in it.
There was a place in Princeton, what was it? Donuts, daycare, and guns. Have you seen that?
No, but I love it already. I love it already. I'm like, are you kidding me? Because women, and she had female mechanics that had gone to trade school that were working on cars, doing oil changes and transmission repairs and all kinds of crap, changing tires, rotating tires, alignments, all that kind of stuff. And then while you're waiting, you can go get a pedicure.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. Are you kidding me right now? Okay. So that's like the kind of innovation, that we need, but like there's absolutely nothing wrong. And I will go toe to toe with anybody that tells me any differently. There is nothing wrong with femininity. It is wonderful. It is awesome. You don't have to be a ninja to like get as a matter of fact, I got rejected more for my masculine side than anything when it came to relationships. Like I didn't realize, like it was like very frustrating to me because I was primarily raised by my grandpa. I spent a lot of time with him. So I had a lot of masculine qualities. I had to learn how to tap into my femininity later on in life. And it served me, very well. But it is a very odd existence to do what I do for a living and then go, but you should be feminine.
Yeah. Yeah. My father-in-law used to take my wife hunting, and he'd take her fishing and tournaments and stuff like that. So she had all the country girl stuff too. So she'll get her hands dirty and things like that too, but she's also a very girly girl too, right? So I think there's a balance there. I mean, we all have our strengths and our weaknesses, and I think you've done a really great job of kind of finding out who you are and who you want to be, and I'm super proud for that. Especially with everything that you've done, from building a business to from where you've come from to where you've gone. I'm ecstatic for you.
Thank you.
And it's very refreshing to see. And I think I'll tie it up with this. Jimmy Valvano, do you know who that is?
I heard the name.
Jimmy V starts a Jimmy V Foundation for cancer research. Went on the ESPYs one year, and he came out and had a speech, and like 3 months later he died. But he came out and he said, if you can live a day to where you laugh and you're driven to tears, that's an emotional win. Then you've experienced all life can give you in that same day. So what we've had here today is some good laughs, had some good tears. And I really appreciate, how vulnerable you've been and the story that you've told today. So thank you again for coming on the podcast, and hopefully we'll do this again.
Yes, I would love part 2.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Everybody, Clearing the Chamber, check it out, .com. And Till next time.